I'm delighted to welcome our distinguished speakers to today's session. They have been introduced to you by Zaim just a while ago. Each of them will cover a specific economic sector that I think we need to be looking at in order to see how we can rebuild and reset the business of that particular sector in moving forward. Building back better is the overall theme that we need to be looking at this session today. And I've been talking to the various speakers earlier, and I would like to suggest that each of them perhaps take 7 to 8 minutes to focus on your specific sectors. Firstly, we will have Dato Muhammad Najib to speak on the palm oil sector, and then we will have Dato Azlin to talk on SMEs and the smaller business, as well as perhaps the challenges and issues facing women entrepreneurs. And then we'll bring in Mr. Abra, the chairman of the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce, to provide a foreign businessman and foreign investors view, but also Abra is MD and CEO of Standard Chartered Bank Malaysia, so he can also provide us with a banker's perspective on national recovery. And then we will bring in my partner and my colleague, Dato Wei Chuan Beng, whom we have been told earlier has been a former chairman of the PCOM Malaysia and the Young Presidents Organization. Dato Wei has been very much involved in the technology sector as a founder of Red Tone Telecommunications and now as a director of Red One. And he sits also on the National Council for the Digital Economy and the Fourth Industrial Revolution. And now, finally, we will have Mr. Stan Singh, who is Secretary General of the Malaysian Retail Chain Association, who will provide perspective from the retail sector. And as we know, the retail sector has been quite hard hit during this pandemic. So without any further ado, I would like to now invite Dato Muhammad Najib, the CEO of the Malaysian Palm Oil Association, to share his thoughts and insights. Dato, over to you.
Thank you, Tan Sri Michael, for the kind introduction. And Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. And a very good afternoon to our distinguished guests, fellow panelists, and our esteemed audience. At the onset, I would like to say a big thank you to the organizer of this NRP Summit for remembering and inviting us from the oil palm sector to participate in this very important seminar. I would like to make use of this opportunity to share with the audience on how the oil palm sector can assist and contribute towards the National Recovery Plan. Being a producer of one of the essential commodity of the country, the oil palm sector was rather fortunate that we have been allowed to operate throughout the PKP with just little hiccups. And we would like to put on record our gratitude to the government for this recognition. And being in the fortunate position allowed the industry to make significant contributions and support to the government efforts in managing this pandemic. Let me begin with a brief preamble on the palm oil industry. And this is meant especially for those that are not in the know of the century-old industry. Over the years, we have planted around 6 million hectares with oil palm in this country, covering about 69% of the country's agricultural land. And after the government, we are the biggest employer with about 750,000 direct employees. And it is also important to know that 500,000 smallholders' livelihood solely depends on oil palm, with an additional 3 million depending on it. And in 2020, Malaysia produces about 19.14 million metric tons of crude palm oil, or 26% of the world's production. In 2022, we generate export revenue of 73.3 billion and contribute towards 3.6% of the country's GDP. But our shortcoming is that we are very much reliant on guest workers, which accounts to about 84% of our total workforce. Ladies and gentlemen, the power industry is currently plagued with many issues from many fronts. But our single biggest problem today is the acute shortage of workers, namely harvesters. I would dare say the shortage since the intake freeze took effect in March 2020 has increased to more than 75,000 workers. That is a very big number. This shortage translates to an alarming 20 to 30% shortfall in our potential production. In 2020, we computed, as a result of this shortfall, the industry loss in revenue is estimated at about 10 to 12 billion on the back of an average CPO price of around 2,685 ringgit per metric ton. And that big reduction in revenue resulted in the reduced contribution in taxes of about 1 billion to the government. And in spite of that, the total taxes paid out by the industry amounted to about 5.2 billion last year. Alhamdulillah, this industry is now enjoying a long bullish run in CPO prices, averaging at more than 4,000 ringgit per metric ton for the first half of 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, this is unprecedented and the highest ever attained. And this is mainly due to the short supply of edible oil worldwide due to many factors. And we expect this trend to prevail through 2022. And as a result, you can see plantation companies reporting very good returns despite lower yields and higher costs brought about by the continued acute shortage of workers. We could have actually done much better if only we could have fully optimized our production numbers. But even with a much lower production and returns, the expected total effective tax, levy and cess paid to the government will be in the range of 9 to 12 billion for 2022. And that 20 to 30% drop in production and revenue will cause the government in an opportunity loss to collect additional taxes of between 1.5 to 2 billion ringgit at the current prices. These are all the low-hanging fruits which we are giving to the government. And to address the shortage and high dependence on guest workers, the industry, together with the relevant government agencies, have embarked on many initiatives. And top of the agenda is the accelerated automation and mechanization transformation plan to reduce reliance on manual and guest workers. But that is work in progress. I have received many comments on why we are not employing locals in place of the guest workers to address this shortage. We actually would love to have locals, but our efforts to enlist them has not been very successful. They seem to shun this industry and deem it as a 4D, dirty, difficult, dangerous, and the last one, demeaning. It is not about the money, as we do offer lucrative total packages, but they do not seem to attract them, especially on harvesting. However, we have not given up hope and shall continue trying to entice them. The fallacy of foreign workers being cheaper is not at all true. In fact, it is costlier to employ guest workers by virtue of the high costs involved in recruitment and training. But for now, the oil palm sector is at the breaking point, and that 20 to 30% loss in production and revenue will fast escalate to much higher numbers if left unchecked. We may not be able to compete with our neighbors by virtue of our higher cost of sale and wastages. And we plead to the government to unfreeze the recruitment of guest workers so as to enable the industry to optimize its production and profits and share its wealth with the nation in its recovery plan. And we stand be guided by any conditions and SOPs set by the authorities. We have shown that we have been able to contain the pandemic since the beginning with very, very low numbers in our operating centers. And we shall continue to do so as responsible corporate citizens. With that, thank you very much, Patrick.
Thank you very much, Dato. You have raised a key challenge facing the palm oil sector, and that is the acute shortage of workers and also the potential loss of revenue for plantation companies as well as for the government. I hope the government will take into account some of your recommendations to unfreeze the freeze on foreign workers, and also to perhaps to hope that the sector, the industry, can further accelerate your own mechanization program going forward into the future to build back better. So thank you, Dato, for sharing the views of the plantation industry. I would like now to invite Dr. Azlin, the chairman of the National Association of Women Entrepreneurs, now and also who was former chairman of Peniagawati, the Bumiputra and Women Entrepreneurs Association. Dr. Azlin will share her thoughts and insights on the challenges facing SMEs, and as well as the perspective from women entrepreneurs. Over to you, Dr. Azlin.
Thank you so much, Tan Sri. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon to the esteemed panelists, to the distinguished participants of this National Recovery Summit. Firstly, may I thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this important summit. And I've been tasked to speak about SMEs, which is a very big subject, but nevertheless is a very important component of the national economy, because as we all know, SMEs are the backbone of the economy. And maybe before I go on, just to remind us some of the figures relating to SMEs. As at 2020, 97.2% of all business establishments in Malaysia are SMEs, right? And that amounts to about 1.2 million business establishments, and out of that, about 80% are micro enterprises. And SMEs contributes about 40% of our GDP and creates employment to more than 7 million Malaysians, and it's nearly 50% of the Malaysia's employment. So that's how important the role of SME is to our nation's economy. And over this pandemic period, of course, we all know that SMEs have been very badly affected by the pandemic, and maybe that some of the reasons for that, why SMEs are affected more than the larger firms, are because they are in the sectors which are most affected by the crisis, and they are more fragile as because of the size. They're more fragile because they have smaller cash buffers, and they have less financial resources, and also and the micros are underbanked or even unbanked. Right, and SMEs also have weaker supply chain capabilities, as well as constraints in operational and management skills, and they're a bit slower in the uptake of the digital tools and technologies. So over the period of 19 or 20 months or so that we have since the start of the MCO, MEDEC has come out with a statistic that nearly 50% of SMEs have closed down, somewhere along the way, maybe after even at the first 3 months after the start of the MCO, or until now, because it's a long time. I mean, 20 months is a long time for any business establishment to sustain. So many have closed down, and of course some are still barely surviving, and there is a small minority which are doing well compared to prior MCO times, and there are some that's doing even better compared to before. So that's the minority who are the lucky ones. I think within the SMEs, we can see that the impact is uneven across the sectors and across the size, right? And I think in implementing any policy to build back better, we need to see the starting point, of the rebuilding. All right, and we are all in the same pandemic storm, but we are not in the same boat. So as I said just now, all right, the SMEs are affected in different ways. Some are closed down, some are still surviving barely, some are some are doing okay. So in any policy, right, I think it is important to be specific in the policies that we are going to undertake. And although the National Recovery Plan and the National Recovery Council, which is established as a result of it, they're good steps. There's good first step. To start off our National Recovery Plan, but I think we will need to go down and segmentize the SMEs into their stages of evolution to be able to come up with specific, clear recovery roadmaps, right, which will be suited to each segment. Because I think sometimes we like to talk about broad policies, right? But at the end of the day, what's important is the effectiveness of the policy. So as we can see, we can segmentize the SMEs into the various stages of business evolution as spoken about just now. So I think we have to take the particular segment and see how we're going, what are the programs or policies which is going to be best suited to the particular segment. Like if the SMEs have already closed down, all right, then we need to come up with some policies to how to start them up, and from scratch, right? And whereas it may be a different policy to address SMEs which are in different stages of evolution. So I think it's important to be specific in the plan, right, so that we can achieve the recovery in a smooth and speedy way, right? And I think it's also important that the government undertakes a study of the business outlook, for Malaysia. See, because now, all right, of course, for the SMEs, especially for the micros, I mean, things are very blur. There's no clarity in everything, and of course, we know that the business landscape has changed. What some businesses which may be which may have done very well before may no longer be relevant in this post-pandemic time. So I think it's important that we do a study, maybe a collaboration of government, academia, NGOs, entrepreneurs, for everyone to put their heads together to come up with some sort of a business outlook, for Malaysia, and to see what are the businesses which are good after the post-pandemic, all right? Because then once we know what are the businesses which are good after the pandemic, right? It is easier to then guide the SMEs into the recovery, because I know now that some of the SMEs, I mean, they are totally they can't see the way forward because they don't know what businesses they're supposed to do. So I think that's important. All right, that's important to come up with um, this business outlook so that we can guide the SMEs to steer them into a recovery. All right, and once we know, what are the business, the goal, for the SMEs, and we know which segment they are, I think it is easier to plan. It's more effective anyway to plan the recovery for them, because the assistance or the training or whatever other assistance in any form, I mean, we need to know where the starting point is, to rebuild, to build back better, we need to know what the starting point is. So I'd like to just come up with an example of, say, digitalization. I know over the 20 months, there have been a lot of programs done by the government on digitalization. And of course, nobody is disputing the fact that digitalization is the way to go. But when we take it broadly, all right, and there are many SMEs who have gone to all these digitalization training programs and all that, but right, some of them have gone in without knowing what to do with it. Right, what to do with the digitalization. So I think, I mean, although it's good that they have acquired the knowledge for digitalization, but at the end, what's important is that they apply that to what they're going to do next in their business and to get better profitability. So I think that's why it's important to match the programs, so that we can recover faster. All right, and I think also important is the delivery of the programs, because as you see now, there's a lot of programs which are duplicated across the ministries, and I think if we can synchronize the programs, if we can synchronize the programs and simplify the delivery and make it easily accessible to all, that will help speed up that recovery. And so generally I think, as I said, I can't stress enough on this. I think to build back better, we need to see the starting point. We need to synchronize the effort, structure the efforts, go see what the exact target market is, and and the programs need to be specific and the delivery simplified. I think I'll pass it back to you, Tan Sri.
Thank you very much, Dato, for sharing the challenges and some of the problems that you think SMEs are facing. I think those are important points. I think you made a very, very key recommendation that the government should be segmentizing policies and incentives for SMEs, because SMEs are so big, so large that you cannot have a one-size-fits-all policy. So I think it is a very useful recommendation that you have put forward. Thank you, Dato. I would like to now invite the next speaker, my chairman, Abra Ano. I say my chairman because I also sit on the same board of directors that Abra chairs, the board of the British Malaysian Chamber of Commerce. We want Abra to share thoughts from the foreign business community as well as a banker in Malaysia. Over to you, Abra.
Thank you, Tan Sri, and good afternoon to everyone, and also dear panelists. It's a very, very timely seminar. I'd like to congratulate KSI for this. I would like to sort of respond in two perspectives. First, as a bank, how we can support the national recovery, as well as also with a specific focus on SMEs. And we just heard, and also the mid-tier companies, we just heard about the challenges they are going through. We are, of course, very sympathetic towards the plight of borrowers affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have been working very closely with the regulator to ensure that assistance continues to be provided to the affected borrowers so that they can remain floating. And also we are determined to support borrowers as well as the economy in general to navigate out of this pandemic. Following the end of blanket moratorium period last year, the banking sector actually adopted the targeted repayment and payment assistance approach to continue providing financial support to the clients affected by the pandemic. The scale, we all know, is unprecedented in the global as well as Malaysia's banking history. Targeted assistance in the long run is crucial for banks to channel help where it is needed most by supporting cash-strapped businesses, provide liquidity to financial markets, and aid people suffering from loss of income. Assistance is offered to borrowers across a range of income groups, with special consideration given to households from the B40 category, micro businesses, and borrowers affected by movement restrictions. Also individual and micro entrepreneur and enterprise borrowers, as well as SMEs affected by the pandemic, actually could apply for a 6-month moratorium from 7 July 2021 onwards under PEMULI. So there has been multiple initiatives taken by the government and also the banking sector. Borrowers are assured that opting in for the moratorium or any other repayment packages will be easy with no need for borrowers to provide supporting documentation. Approval will be given automatically. So that was a sort of an improvement from the previous R&R facility. We've also seen how the pandemic has been a major catalyst for digitalization. Over the past 1 year, we have seen massive changes in the way businesses and organizations are now operating. Digital transformation has accelerated across every industry, with digital channels having become the primary conduits of customer engagements, business productivity, and supply chain resiliency. So in this respect, the banking sector plays a crucial role in helping to elevate the digital agenda across its corporate and business client base during this time to raise their competitiveness. And that also helps reduce their fixed costs. Added with movement restriction and phased reopening of the economy under National Recovery Plan, our role in helping clients going digital is even more crucial. And among others, Standard Chartered built a state-of-the-art single scalable payment engine that supports both B2B and B2C domestic and cross-border payments. We're investing heavily in the e-commerce space and providing consistent and scalable solutions for online collections, escrow accounts, QR codes, and real-time direct debits. So another promising solution that the banking sector is bringing is the blockchain. A common misconception is that blockchain can only be used by large corporations, but it can also be a game changer for SMEs in the quest for trade finance. We recognize that this potential and investment in blockchain is very crucial for the whole sector, and that will really collect the SMEs, B2B, B2C, will make it much easier. For example, last year we helped one of the international companies to perform first blockchain transaction for their cargo operations. So which really helped eliminate the transit time as well as the risk of documentation. So this is being embraced globally, and we see that as part of the recovery, such technological intervention is also critical. So in terms of, we just were having a discussion with the Honorable YB Finance Minister to really look at from the banking sector what can be done more to support the economy as well as the SME specifically. So hopefully there will be more initiative coming forward, because as the sectors open up, some hardy sectors like tourism, retail, tourism related will need specific, I would say, support in accessing finance. Because the banks, when they see that there is no visibility when the recovery will happen, then financing becomes a bit constrained. So we are also requesting government to work with the banks so that we can facilitate access to credit. So I'm sure very soon all of you will be able to hear what are the new things coming on stream. So there is coming. So the BMCC welcomes the governance efforts develop and introduce the National Recovery Plan that is evidence and science-based, which will provide more support as the economy goes up. Strengthening the healthcare response to the pandemic, immunizing the Rakyat, supporting the Rakyat and businesses are key to moving forward to the next normal. The BMCC would like to congratulate the government for the extremely well executed national COVID-19 immunization program over the last 2 months, whereby we saw that the immunization rate has gone up to more than 68% of the total adult population, having received at least one dose. Collaboration with various ministries such as MITI on PICAS and others were also very commendable. With the immunization program on the right course, the BMCC believe that the government can now consider additional efforts into supporting the people and businesses in this new environment with the next normal in mind. This will help create confidence for businesses to bounce back and bring new investors into Malaysia to help the economy. So from the chamber, we would request that as the economy opens up, because there are a lot of investors who have got factories, plants, and also are part of the global supply chain. So sometimes essential and non-essential businesses, it creates a bit of a confusion, because if the plant can operate, but we need the ecosystem, the supply chain also to operate. Otherwise, you can't have a full-fledged operation in place. So these are the things that we request the government to look at, which would help propel the recovery sooner rather than later. So Tan Sri, at this point, I will pause and then maybe subsequently come back on any other questions that may be coming in. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abra, for sharing your thoughts. You have very clearly pointed out the role of banks and how banks have been helping SMEs and Malaysian businesses in terms of digitalization, e-commerce, as well as blockchain implementation. You have shared also the wish list of the BMCC and the British investors here on things that can be accelerated to open up the economy faster. Thank you very much, Abra, for sharing your thoughts and insights. May I now invite our next speaker, my partner and my very old friend, Dr. Wei Chuan Bing, who is a technology entrepreneur who has been investing in telecommunications, computers, and IT. Dr. Wei will share some perspectives on the challenges facing information technology and the technology sector. Over to you, Dr. Wei.
Tan Sri, Michael Yo, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We talk about national recovery, and now we are into lunchtime. So it seems when it comes to recovery, there's no lunch. And we got to kind of see this as actually also, equivalent analogy that we don't have time for lunch. We must continue. There are a lot for us to accomplish together. Now, I'd like to invite all of us to zoom out a little bit instead of just looking inwards in a country, in a society. While zooming out, it is to have a global perspective first. You see, this pandemic is going to taper off, and the period is likely to take the next 2 years until we can fully overcome that. And as such, recovery for the world, not just Malaysia, is likely to take the period of the next 2 years. So if you are able to kind of align to that, then you give us different kind of way to look at this recovery process. Still at the global kind of view, the mindset is such that we have to understand pandemic is global. Borders are closed. Likewise, climate change also global. And we have to deal with it just like pandemic. Now, the other one is this fund flow. We talk about a lot of shortage of capital and so on. Fund and capital, they are also global. So are we just looking at what we have here, or can we look at the pool of global fund? And at the backdrop, we also see there is this trade war, logistic price escalation, disruption of the supply chain, and so forth. And we are not in isolation. And in addition to that, if we want to look out for the opportunities, what can we do? And the other one is not related to technology. It is more about talent. Could talent flow in and flow out apart from foreign workers? That may have to be reconsidered as well. And the other one, not related to the technology and maybe related to technology, is about food security. So with this backdrop, I like to kind of zoom in to where digital technology and regulation could all be put together. While we recognize that our borders are closed, and likewise many other countries, or semi-closed to some extent, but the border of the cyber world has always been wide open. Except maybe there are some countries that may have a little bit of a practice of a firewall and so forth, but largely the world out there is actually open to cyber world. So if we were to bring income to the country, apart from generating income from within the country, we will have to look at the opportunities from the cyber world. And if you want to look at the capital, apart from internal capital, we will have to look at the foreign capital. And there must be ways to achieve that. And so the desired outcome is this. How do we achieve breakthrough? How do we make impact in a recovery? Then how do we embrace the borderless cyber world to spur our recovery and growth? I would like to kind of forward a few recommendations, Tan Sri, so that KSI as well as this National Recovery Summit could hopefully forward this to the relevant the government agencies and so forth. At the same time, we need to have a whole nation approach in this recovery process. First recommendation I like to make is about, I may call it COVID-19 liberation policy. It is a policy for the next 2 years. Why? Because we must believe that the private sectors, the people on the street, they know they have to survive. They want to try in every way possible across all sectors. Now, what government need to do is to suspend some of the so-called potential barriers in the form of regulatory constraint. If there is a suspension of that, of course, we have heard of palm oil sector requesting for bringing in the foreign workers. That's maybe one aspect of it. However, I'm referring more to the digital sector here, ranging from provisioning of digital services. There are various licenses relating to fintech, relating to healthcare, relating to education, of which it requires respective ministries from KKMM to MOHI, to Ministry of Work, Ministry of Finance, KKMM or Ministry of Housing and Local, there's a government, Ministry of Health and so forth, to be able to take a view. This is, let's say, adopting COVID-19 liberation policy, and therefore suspend certain part of regulation when the industry want to actually embrace and promote digital services that is actually stepping into boundary, often that require licenses and so forth. In this regard, there are examples that I would like to kind of suggest. For example, for the universities to come up with programs to rapidly train these digital talents, all the new program will require approval. And then if the universities are actually given the mandate that they could offer new programs as long as it is to rapidly develop digital talent, then they could be, for these 2 years, exempted from certain approval, including the use of certain terms that may be not welcome or not suitable by, let's say, the regulators. Because sometimes you want to call it degree, you want to call it masters and all this, it requires a pretty lengthy approval process. So the liberation policy would accord the executive directive to all the ministries to take the kind of informed judgment call to suspend regulation for the next 2 years. Now, second part is to recognize that digital means big breakthrough, also mean integrity, also mean is a force of good. Why? Because you can achieve any new innovation with digital technology and adoption. You could also ensure integrity because information are all traceable. You may do healthcare services, your clients and all this, you will know. If our doctors, pharmacies and so on could do prescription, consultation, teleradiology and so forth for the region, not just in the country, then we can generate a lot of income back to the country as well. All right. The next one is about digital infrastructure. We have seen that we have lost a couple of very major international cables, that submarine cables that are being laid or invested by Facebook, Google, and the like. I think it is something that we must be able to address by having a more liberal policy in allowing submarine cable landing station and to have the kind of a cabotage exemption. I think this is where the industry players are actually crying out for the government to relax the regulation such that they could quickly invest, put in the infrastructure. So likewise, the other agencies ranging from, let's say, the agencies such as LLM, for example, give more rights away and support for telecommunication companies to lay infrastructures and towers. I think this is absolutely necessary. And then the next recommendation, it is to address unemployment and digital talent at the same time. You see, those days when people are unemployed after graduation, they will take 1 year diploma in education and become teacher. That was actually the previous era. Now the digital era, in my digital, wearing the hat of the National Digital Council member, we are aware that this few years, our country will need 500,000 digital talent in order to make the impact of the digital transformation. So we would want to have the universities to breach those unemployed graduates by giving them a masterclass, postgraduate diploma. It's like 1 year to repurpose the career pathway. If the government fund were to come in either from MOF or from any other source, I think this will be a big pool. Unemployed graduates and unemployed workers who are youth be given 1 year to repurpose the career pathway. Actually, I do have two in my organization. These people who have repurposed their career pathway and they are very productive, and they were from psychology and the business background and now become the digital talent to develop system. So I think with this few recommendations, I would hope that it would then have a strong impetus to spur that recovery, because the strong adoption and also the encouragement of innovation with all forms of digital services that will be unfettered. All right, so I'm going to pause here, Tan Sri, and then continue the discussion with a few other points. Should there be any questions?
Thank you very much, Dato, for the future forward thinking that you are taking. I like your proposal for a COVID-19 liberation policy and the various recommendations that you have put forward there, as well as the digital initiatives that you have also put forward, and the need to repurpose some of our workers as well to be more digitally exposed and to be able to take up digital skills. So thank you, Dato, for that view. We now invite our last speaker, Mr. Stan Singh from the Malaysian Retail Chain Association, to reflect on the views and the challenges facing the retail sector currently. Mr. Stan Singh.
Very good afternoon, Tan Sri, Michael, and thank you so much, the organizers, for inviting me. At the same time, I'd like to wish our distinguished panelists, learned panelists, I should say, a very good afternoon. And let's move on this topic. It's a very important topic, and thank you for the opportunity again. If I may, Tan Sri, I would probably want to do a bit of a preamble to try to get into the subject matter, because I like to draw some parallels. And the last few days, the story of 9/11 has been very hot topic, as Americans gearing up to look at 20 years of that event that happened. And the reason I want to bring this story into that is because later I will connect this to what we are going through today in this. For example, when you talk about the 9/11 story, Tan Sri, people will say, oh, it was actually a terrorist attack. But in this one attack, there were multiple disasters. For example, plane being hijacked, terrorist attack, plane crashing in building on fire, building collapsing, loss of lives, loss of corporate data, personal possessions, valuables lost, displacement of companies and staff, loss of business and trade, security compromise, and for many, there was a loss of hope. And on the same note, travel became very difficult for us to travel after 9/11. Airports had now got very strict. In fact, we kind of got through it and we kind of live with it. So on the same parallel, if I could draw the attention today with the pandemic, although we have one pandemic disaster, I'm speaking strictly for retailers here, which includes our food and beverage and of course, our members specific in MRCA. Most of our members in this pandemic are facing parallel issues. Number one, cash flow positions. Some of them got probably 2 months, 3 months more, 3 months, maybe less, the last one to take on them. Number two, overstock for inventory that they couldn't sell because of the lockdowns, because of the movement control order, they could not move inventory. And obviously some of them had to even cancel the orders, but committed orders. So obviously cost is an issue. Then we had outlets being closed because they cannot sustain anymore. Staff has to be laid off, for example. Business closures, not able to get timely loans. Even the monitoring that they get, they had challenges and issues on the interest calculation, for example. There's also lack in subsidies, for example. And even they're allowed to open partially or with certain control hours, the cost of doing business has been surmounting because it is really the amount of business that they do in the short hours that they have, with the lack of the customers, with the lack of customers coming into the shops, into the malls, this has caused tremendous heartache and pain and hardship to the retailers. In fact, we're still going through that today. So against the parallel, I just wanted to draw this attention so that we understand that in one disaster, sometimes there are so many other disasters that we face without knowing. This is one example. And obviously we look at business continuity, Tan Sri, here, because in order to continue where we are, we need to know where we can take the next sensible step. Without knowing our position, we can never go in the next step because it is very, very difficult to know and to start, to kickstart or to jumpstart, even with things that are in front of us, simply because we're just limited and hands are tied. Now, earlier one of the learned speakers said that we are in different boats. I do understand. Some of us are in different boat sizes. Some of us are even in dinghies because our boats have capsized and we are floating, hoping that we can ring fence ourselves to protect before that also capsize. So it is really, really dire at the moment. And therefore, our goal remains that we need to survive this calamity to get to a better place. Against this background, Tan Sri, let me just perhaps then add some pointers. I think we can look at the government apparatus here in some respect. For example, the collaboration. But before that, let me just take this opportunity to thank the government because the efforts that they have rendered to us in a number of areas. And we really, really appreciate the handouts and their assistance in many, many respects. However, having said that, I think what we would like to see is a close industry collaboration. That means the government apparatus, the agencies, and those that are operating to work with the industries to get feedbacks of the issues, so-called the pain points of the industry that are facing on the ground level, so that we can then build this road to recovery together. And that's, I think, very, very important. And by the way, some of us, our starting points are different. We are not in the same starting point because we have different positions in place. And our tunnels, although we can see the light of the tunnel at the end of the tunnel, but the tunnels are long for some, and for some it is short. So therefore, we need to come to some balanced position. And the whole idea of this is so that the curve could be brought down or could be balanced if we looked at in a view by the government, by the industry, to help the retailers, especially some of them actually in SMEs as well, so that we can get to a better place. Now, if I could just add some of the retail specifics today for recovery. What we are asking today also means that we want all sectors of businesses to be open safely. All equally means there should be assistance in financials, rental reliefs, speedy recognition for frontline support staff subsidies, clear SOPs embedded in the process, and having a task force by the agencies of the respective government to help us, to help the retailers to provide aids in difficult times arising, and making sure there are rules that are common and across the board, because typically sometimes we find that the SOPs itself are very, very confusing, where one can do one, where the other can do not. But then again, at the end of the day, all of us are confused. So we just want clarity in that area so that we can work on one common strategy, one common approach, and one common rule to move forward in that context. And that will be the first step for us to start our recovery as far as retail is concerned. Now, we talked about, and Dato we did speak about digitalization for retail, and I do completely agree, and was the other speaker as well. Now, I say personally, digitalization is not the future, but it is now. And the pandemic has created a golden opportunity for retailers to embrace technology, to provide retail businesses with opportunities to harness this and create the new opportunities. However, in the context of this opportunity that the retailers are looking forward to go into online, to go into some kind of digitalization, so that they can actually change their business models, there's the issue about funding. You may say that, yes, we do have grants that are available by the respective agencies that provide the grants, granted and taken. But there are two issues there. Number one, issue that is sometimes when they apply for the grants, the process is too long. It takes a long time to get the grant on board. That's one. Two, the other issue is the amount, the quantum may not be enough. Because if you want to digitalize your business, if you look at the total cost of ownership or the total cost of adoption per se, it is not just the amount that will cover, it will at least give you, you need to take it to at least 1 year down the road, maybe more. So the fund that they have may not be enough. So funding it's equally important. Maybe the government, what we can recommend, Tan Sri, is that we can do the funding in tranches. Maybe the funding could be in a quantum, but it give you in tranches so that help you to bridge over, cross over those gaps while you progress, and then you come into a full digitalization so that you can digitalize all your assets. And that would be very, very important for us if you look at digitalization. In the interest of time, I just want to touch a little bit on talent development. I think that the way has clearly mentioned that what we need to do is, because there's a huge amount of staff that's been laid off at the moment in the retail industry. Many from the retail sectors, from the F&B, basically they have been laid off because business is closed, no longer sustainable, and so forth. So I think, and our recommendation for consideration will be this: business owners today who wants to digitalize are not IT savvy. So they will depend on this digital talent to help them through this, the gap, to bridge this gap, the shortfall. Obviously, when this pool of people that have left because they've been laid off, who has got domain knowledge of the industry because they worked in the retail industry, perhaps, to your point earlier mentioned about that way, we could reinforce them back into what we call train them up, train this talent up in the digital world, in the digital economy, so that they can go back and be re-employed and de-employed again in organizations. Because I think that's very, very important. Right now, we have a huge lack of pool, because I do not believe that even if organizations on retail specific, when they digitalize their business, they still need the talent underneath to support them to take them through. Now, the other issue is this: because of this lack right now, we have a very, very, very small pool of people who understand, who are digitally trained, who understand digital cycles and business works in that era. For example, in e-commerce. Now, there's a vicious cycle at Tansi, because unfortunately, because of this small pool, they are going here, they're moving from one organization to the other because somebody's paying them more and they're moving forward. And therefore there's this gap, this vicious cycle come back in and out again all over the time and all the time. So in order to get that going, I think we can train this talent pool, bring them into perspective, and at the same time, maybe the government could consider giving incentives to organizations to rehire them back into the business. That could be one option to look at, so that we can get this pool. After all, I personally believe it is the strong-minded workers that will build the country's industry and the nation together. It is the mindset of the talent. These people are very key and are very, very part of the huge equation. So these are my thoughts, Tansi, that I wanted to share in the short, the 5-7 minute space that I have. But I wanted to perhaps say what I wanted to say and just wait. Maybe there's some questions, Tansi, then I will address them. But so on that note, I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Stan, for your comments. And I think you have raised a number of interesting issues, the need for greater collaboration between government and the retail sector. You suggested a task force to be set up. You have raised the question of funding and reskilling of people to develop digital skills with them. I think your past role and experience in PCOM would be of great benefit to MRCA, and you can lead them on the digital path forward for the retail sector as well. So I think those are very useful comments, Stan. We
Thank
have
you,
just a
Tansi.
few minutes left before we end this session, and need for everyone to get some food. I don't want to be reminded by Dato way that we have to forgo our lunch for this seminar. We still have some time before our next session for us to get something to eat. But before we end, we have, as I said, about a few minutes left. Can I just, there are no questions posed in the chat box that I see. Can I just ask each of our speakers to give a 1-minute summary of what you think would be a most important wish list that you want the government to do? So a quick 1 minute per person. Dato Najib, would you like to start with first?
Of course, thank you, Michael. I think my wish list, and I think the budget 2022 is coming, and I hope the government will look at it, is to review back the tax structure for the palm oil industry. Because the palm oil industry is now the most heavily taxed sector in the country. We are paying a lot of type of taxes, windfall taxes, levies, cess, everything. So we would like the government to look back at whether this thing need to be reviewed, because it's a bit archaic already, some of the taxes. And the other one, of course, you know, our big issue today, as I did mention during my presentation just now, is our labor issue. So hopefully the government will take a look back, and we are open to listen to whatever they tell us to do. We will follow, as long as they give us this worker for now.
Okay, thank you, Dato. Dato Azlin, a quick 1 minute from you.
My wish list would be for the government to work very closely together with the industry and the NGOs and the entrepreneurs, you know, to come up with you know, a business outlook, you know, for Malaysia post pandemic. All right, and as I said earlier, you know, to look into the segments of within the SMEs and to match the specific programs to the SMEs so that we can build back better in the fastest time possible. That's all.
Thank you, Dato. Mr. Abra.
Thank you, Tansri. Now, I would like to echo what other panelists have said. It's a balancing life and livelihood. I would like to see that we can safely open the economy quickly, because we see that a lot of our clients, customers, and investors are struggling because they cannot operate at full capacity. I just had the opportunity to travel to US and Europe. They have really bounced back. They've really bounced back. They've opened up with high vaccination, opened up shopping malls, entertainment outlets, dining, industries. So I hope and expect that we sort of take it on stride and open up the economy safely as soon as the vaccination reaches a level, and avoid any confusion, because there are a lot of confusion in the SOPs, who can open, and also in the supply chain ecosystem. So just to removing that and moving on with a stronger Malaysia. Thank you.
Thank you, Abra. Dato Wei.
Yes, I would say I hope that this can be adopted by the cabinet as well as the National Recovery Council. That first of all, government have this broad policy, COVID-19 liberalization policy, take away all the impediment, all the barriers for the digital adoption and digital services. Take away that, and also suspend some of the so-called requirements for regulation. And then second part is this: give all the support and funding for digital adoption, for digital expansion, for digital talent, especially to repurpose the career pathway of the unemployed graduates and unemployed workers.
Thank you. Finally, Mr. Smes Singh.
Thank you, Tansri. I think from our perspective, we want to be engaged with the government closely, very closely. That's our wish. And also, before anything has been announced, or at least in terms of SOPs, if they can consult and understand some of the pain points and issues, so that we work hand in hand to get to a better place, that would be great. And point two, obviously, funding is very, very key because of the cash flow situations. And this is where we are wanting a lot of help from the government, and of course other agencies as well, and other components in the ecosystem, so that we can all get to a better place, Tansri. That's our wish for recovery. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Ben. So ladies and gentlemen, we have come to the close of this session. It has been an interesting discussion. We've heard the views, the recommendations from our speakers, and we do hope that the government will take into account some of these suggestions. Together with the ECKR, we will put together a set of policy proposals that we can put forward to the National Recovery Council. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for joining with us this afternoon. We will have a short break. We do hope you will all come back again in the afternoon, because the afternoon is a very important session. We've heard from the business community. We've heard from our healthcare professionals. In the afternoon, we will hear from some of our civil society groups, the National Council for Women Organization, as well as the all-party parliamentary group on the SDGs. And I think that it's important to get the views that we need to also take into account, the non-business views from civil society. So do join us again this afternoon. Thank you very much and have a good lunch.